It was actually kind of a debate of whether or not I would even come because last night I think I got 2 hours sleep. I thought, oh man, I don't know about this. But I had to. I wanted to. Because one is, as I had said earlier, I missed all of you. But maybe more importantly, because I wanted you to know that your prayers were heard. And that my time with God and as a family, He was at work. And I think some of the lessons that I learned from that, I think, weren't just for me, but even for all of us to be able to look at in our own life. I was gone, as I said, for those 4 weeks, although those who were close within the church know that I didn't stay away very well. But maybe that speaks to a lot of the way that I am in the sense that I'm kind of I wouldn't say I'm a recovering workaholic. And there's always something to do. And I'm ambitious. Even in my 4 weeks that I was going to go away, my agenda was very ambitious. Somewhere in there was rest in that agenda, but it was ambitious nonetheless. And so there was a lot going on, and at the top of that list, if you will, was the idea or the desire to reconnect with God at some, in some way, whatever that would be. And so today's message is titled Abiding in Christ, and not that a message has to have a title. Originally it was what I learned on my summer retreat, which is something you do the first day of school maybe or something like that. But the idea behind it was to really kind of, share with you this journey I went on, and a journey that every one of us can do. I'm no special in any way in what I learned, but the sabbatical title, if you would call it, we called it a sabbatical 4-week retreat, was In the Search of Joy, trying to be able to rediscover that. As pastors, we instinctively care for those lives that God puts around us. I mean, the very fact that we go to a place and we're called into ministry, and certainly in starting a church, is this inner burden to want to see God change lives. To believe that by some amazement of God that He would choose to use you to be able to affect the life of another person. And want to see the fullest potential of what God can do in the lives of those people that God put in your path and the people that you have in that path. And to do that requires a lot of faith, of course, because all of that is describing something that is not within my possibility of doing it all. I mean, it's not in the realm of something we can do. Only God can do. And so it requires a lot of faith. But on the other side of that, it creates an amazing amount of joy. Because you see yourselves being a part of something far bigger than you. And you see God tangibly at work on moments of the day, multiple times in the day, in unique ways that surprise you in ways that you never thought was, like, that wasn't my idea, but man, look what God did. And you can't help but bleed over with this level of joy that goes on in your life. And, when it comes to starting a church, that's all part of that natural process. Seeing that happen. People are around, you come together, you hear the stories, and you see that. And certainly the sense of responsibility that comes with that as well. I don't know if any of you get Showtime, but I watch this show called Franchise. It follows the Giants as they try to repeat the championship. Probably no one watches it but me. But anyway, it's a show where you go behind the scenes and you hear about the people and you just kind of see what's going on as they're struggling right now and things like that. Well, anyway, what's interesting about that is because as a pastor sometimes I look at the church as a ball team. Now, forgive me for those who have no care of any baseball analogy. But it helps you kind of understand from where I come when you consider the loss of joy, baby, because you look at God bringing the owner bringing this team together to accomplish amazing things. And every person is a player on that team, and every person has at-bats, and so, a mark of a great player is their batting average, how well they do, and they're never at 1,000, but, if they're batting 3-something, that's great, and, and when they're in the 100s, it means 1 out of 10 hits, they're slumping and stuff. And so, everybody's at an at-bat. And so an at-bat for us in the Christian faith is the opportunity where we show forgiveness, when we show kindness to someone else, when we respond in generosity, when we would respond in forgiveness, when we love each other or show love to someone else, and are selfless. And I mean, there's thousands of ways in which you could be these moments where you have these at-bats. But in doing that, you see God at work in your life. And so when you come together, you get excited because you want to see these moments and these at-bats. And the frustration sometimes as a pastor is you'll have people on your team who are just not that interested in worrying about how they're doing batting-wise. And oftentimes they'll drift to a larger church where they can kind of hide their batting average and no one ever really knows. But in a smaller church, it's a big deal because you're an important part of the team. And we want to hit big, we want to score, we want to do great things. And so you care a lot about people who don't see that. And therefore they struggle. And so they find themselves drifting away from God, and so their life is kind of distant in a lot of ways. And yet they're a part of the team. And you don't get to send them to the minors or anything like you would do in baseball. As a pastor, though, and here's the point of all of that. As a pastor, though, there's a tendency to think, to feel responsible. And so you think of God as a George Steinbrenner, my head's working on me now. Anyway, as an owner of the team, and you're thinking, maybe we need a management change because this team isn't hitting, and the players aren't doing their thing, and so forth. And so you feel like maybe I'm not coaching well, and all this kind of stuff. But which can cause you to kind of feel the pressure of ministry. And every minister goes through that. Every person can go through that at some level. When they find it becoming about what they're doing or not doing. Am I doing things right? And you begin to define your faith or your life more about the results as opposed to about the process of this relationship that God is about. And the truth is, God is never about the results. I mean, the results happen, but it's always about the relationship. The call to ministry is about this faith in God and being used by Him to touch lives, but God is the one who does the results. We're just in this relationship along the way. So this last year for me has been a lot about really realizing this pressure I put on and this sense of overworking myself, saying, what can we do to help Heartland get out of a batting slump and get going and all this kind of stuff, you can play in your head. And in the end saying, what can I do to enjoy the game again? What can I do to get the joy back? And it's that process that I really want to kind of share with you what I learned in this as I went into this 4 weeks saying, okay, God, you got 4 weeks. Get the joy back, in that particular thing. So let me first start with a word of encouragement and also a disclaimer. First, a disclaimer. I'm still learning from God. I'll tell you, God did not work on my agenda. 4 weeks was not like, okay, we're done. You graduated. Go on your way, Mark. Or anything like that. It is an ongoing work in process. That's a lifelong work in process. I don't have my life figured out, nor I'm sure you do, in the sense of all that God is doing. And you approach life with a sense of what you think it is, but God is always teaching things along the way. And so it is with me or any pastor for that matter. The minute you put your pastor at a place that they got it all figured out, you're in trouble. And that's what I love. That goes into the second thing, what I love about Heartland. One of the things I love, I know you got a couple people came up here, and I didn't pay them, who said, hey, good for you to send your pastor on a sabbatical. Because a lot of churches won't. A lot of churches say, hey, look, we pay you to be here. You don't need that. Buckle up, whatever. A lot of pastors will say, I don't need it, because they really want to have that sense of ownership. And in those situations, most often you see failures. You see churches, you see pastors failing because they don't recognize the continual need to reevaluate, reassess, to really go back to God and refresh themselves and recognize the areas maybe where they've drifted away. And so as a church, that's a great thing that we're willing to do that. The other thing is I want you to understand this is not a thing at all about, okay, man, we're in dire straits. We've got to do something. We are a church just like every other church, and every other church has their own issues and their own needs, and we're always trying to learn how can we grow and how can we become healthier and how can we, what can God be doing? And we're in that very same place. There are some great things that have been going on even recently in this church that are things that we think, wow, look what God is doing. Life groups is an example. And coming together are just things that, 2 years ago, we didn't even have them, let alone that we actually got together and talked about stuff like that. And there's some great stuff that's happening there. And so I don't want you to sit there and think that, okay, this going away is like, oh man, I got to figure something out. And I might have gone to that, but it wasn't about that. And so there's really some great stuff. And this is all really, really kind of good stuff along the way. But I do think I think that the lesson that I learned is something that we can all learn, because I think we all can get in a place in our life where we feel distant from God. Maybe, man, a year ago or 2 years ago or maybe even a month ago, God, I felt so close to God. And now something's happened and we just have drifted and I don't see Him anymore, and I don't where is He? And the joy or the peace or the contentment or the things that you found that used to be your faith, to find it, made it so special, have kind of disappeared. And you're wondering why and how do I get it back? And so the very things that I kind of went through, every one of us go through at some level or maybe going through right now. And so I want to encourage you about that. You don't need to go away 4 weeks to do it, nor did I, other than the fact that I needed to create space because of ministry. It's something we all can learn. So with that, I'm going to tell you a couple passages we're going to look at quickly. And first of all, one is John 15, 1 through 11. I title this section "The Search for Joy" because of what I said in going forward and trying to do it. And so when I kind of went away on this retreat, I had a big list of stuff to do. Pretty much all of it got no, Mark, no, we're not going to do that. No, oh yeah, we'll put that away. Maybe we'll do it later. No, we're not doing that. So, God kind of sorted through that list pretty quickly. But one of the things on the list that I think He agreed we got to work on is this presence of God, this relationship with Him, how to be able to get that joy back. And so when I went with that, an obvious verse to go through our passage was John 15 for me, because of what it says in that passage. So I'm going to start by reading this passage, and then I'm going to just highlight a couple things that are a few little things that came out of that thing that I think help in what I'm talking about. John 15, and I'm reading this from the American Standard Version, so it's not going to be identical to your passage in the Bible, and I'll explain to you why in a minute. Yours is just as good as this one, so don't freak out. Verse 1. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, He takes away. Every branch that does bear fruit, He prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As a branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown in the fire, and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. Verse 11 was the verse that just drew me right away to this passage. You know, this idea of my joy can be in you, and your joy can be full. And so right away I'm thinking, okay, that's what I want. Let me go back and just say, okay, what is the things in here that either are missing in my life that has kind of caused that joy to come again? And what is it that I can do to make my joy full again, the joy in my life? Well, first of all, and in your insert, and again, I just did it, and I didn't change it because I wrote them as almost statements, but really they're more of a question. So the first statement in your insert would be, we must abide in Christ. The question is, am I abiding in Christ? The question I ask myself, am I abiding in Christ? The NIV, I think the version that's in your seats uses the word remain in me and I in you. And that's fine too. Both of them come from the same Greek word, meno, which means to remain or to stay or to dwell and abide. I like the other version only because remain to me sounds like, okay, you need to stay. I know you want to go, and there's places to go, which would be my mentality, but you need to stay, and you need to not go.